welcome everybody to another episode of the Key to Games podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Blazer, and joining me, my co-host from Casual Game Studio, Joshua Reyes. How are you holding up in this fine weather we're having?
I'm doing all right. I'm staying kind of cool right now. Enjoying the nice cool AC. Other than that, I'm doing pretty good. Oh, school's starting next week, so we've been doing that, getting ready for school. A lot of game dev, and I actually was preparing some YouTube content to get ready for the game jam coming up. So a little addition for that. Josh, how are you doing?
Well, apparently, I needed to get additional difficulty modifiers in that Souls-like called Life, and my AC is broken. Yeah. So it's been out for like the last 3 days. We're going to hopefully have someone out for Monday to start getting estimates or getting a new one, but we're looking at least another 4 to 5 days of no AC during like the hottest summer so far.
Yeah, definitely. But you got yourself a nice fan going and everything, right?
Yeah, unfortunately it's downstairs. It'll be too loud to be up here. So I may have to move that up when I'm doing my talk later.
It might be wafting under the door a little bit. Might be helping out.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. And if anyone can send me lots of just like giant ice blocks, I could use them right now.
Ice blocks in chat.
Oh boy, but yeah, the book work is still continuing. I'm almost done with it. The cover art is coming along, and as Josh said, we are getting ready for the Game Wisdom Game Jam. So by the time this video goes up, the Game Jam will have officially started. We are right now at just hitting 30 entries, or 30 people who sign up. So
yeah, good deal.
I'm hoping we get a lot of games, and I hope every one of them has no volume sliders, like an I Am Sparkus moment. Everyone just refuses to put a volume slider in.
I'm hoping that maybe someone will do like a full, the whole game is a volume slider, and that's it. That might be interesting.
Yeah. Let's see. Other than that, we're going to try and get everyone together. Thank you, Chris. To do like a special like judging / showcase of the games, probably after the submissions and the game jam is up. I've gotten 3 of the 4 judges on for. I gotta get in touch with my last one tomorrow or on Monday, and we'll see what we can do there. But I think that'll be a lot of fun, and we can share the pain of no volume sliders together.
Exactly. It'll be great.
Yeah. But speaking about volume sliders and stuff like that, that will take us to our topic. This will be kind of a shorter but still very important one on game engines. As I literally just gave a talk at a library about getting into game development this past week, and one of the things that I talked about was how much the state of public game engines over the past decade has really led to a lot of the changes that we've seen in game dev. And we've had light conversations about this in the past, but again, 30 years ago, you were not going to get access to something like Unity or GameMaker. If you wanted to make a video game, you had to be a part of a major studio, lots of people behind it, of course, lots and lots of money, and of course, and many major studios today still have their own like private game engines. I think EA has Frostbite. I know Activision must have something as well. I think either Activision or Nintendo, I forget which one has their own internal. But unless you are working directly for those companies, you are never going to touch those engines. They are, licensed and proprietary to those respective companies. But then we fast forward to, it was like 2007, 2008, when we started to see the likes of Unity show up. And then we go into the 2010s, and now today we have multiple different game engines, all completely free. I say this to the people, I say this to like the students when I give the talk, I say like, these are literally free. You can, pause this video, you can wait until I'm done talking, go download them, they are there and ready for you. And it has led, again, to so much of what we call the independent market. So, since Josh over here is both a game developer and someone who knows a thing or two about working with game engines, I'm going to let him take the lead. So I guess my question to kind of get us started with is, as a game developer, Thank you, Chris. You're spamming volume sliders in chat.
But we forgot the ice cubes, though, for Josh. We need more ice cubes.
But as a game developer, someone who's worked with these game engines, how has it been for you? Like what has been like your thoughts on how things have changed over particularly the last decade when it comes to indie dev?
Well, I mean, it's been just a massive boon for us, right? And just a side note, I think it's really helping with the like AAA malaise, right? Because it's allowing just like basically anybody that has access to a laptop to start instantly creating. And like, you don't even need a high-powered laptop, depending on what engine you use, right? You can use some engines that literally work in the browser. There's like Godot runs literally like you can run it on your Android or iOS phone. So there's really like no restrictions, right? And then when it comes to like assets and asset creation, there's marketplaces, there's all kind of ways to access it. Because when I first got into game dev, I got into game dev a long time ago, right? And I was writing in like BASIC, right? Like on an Apple IIe. And I mean, you were basically writing in BASIC or, and that didn't run. And your other hope was just like maybe modding, right? Like modding Doom or modding Quake and like working within the limitations of it, right? But now the way it is, it's just open to everyone. And the breadth of engines that is available and coming out is just unbelievable. And the research that I was doing, I literally downloaded like my main engine that I use, which Rooster Rampage and Samurai Pig are being created in Unreal Engine. And I previously used to work in Unity, but I went ahead and downloaded like everything from Game Maker to RPG Maker to test them all out and just see what was going on and what I was missing out on. And I was quite amazed at the leaps and bounds that most of the games engines made and what they allow people to do. So yeah, it's really, again, just like an embarrassment of riches right now for game developers to like start. You can literally just start right now. Like you're saying, you can start downloading them during the podcast and then afterwards start working on the game and get ready for the game jam. So,
yep. And again, like everyone I'm sure can make No Man's Sky in every game engine, like 4 days, like maybe like 6 days for RPG Maker. It's it's not as powerful, but you can do No Man's Sky in 6 days, right?
Yeah, definitely 6 days. I mean, I think that's like probably like a little too long, maybe 4 days more applicable, right? But yeah, definitely, and that is, and it's not like really a far cry of like, you can like literally like get a prototype up and running really quick and really fast, depending on which engine you use. We'll get into it in a little bit, but the engine that you first choose is actually quite important, like depending where you're at in your game development, where you are at your skill level, what you know, and like, so what you choose at the beginning will definitely like can either impede or definitely excel you in game development. So.
Mm-hmm. And while we're going to be focusing on this cast on the major engines, Unity, Godot, and so on, there's also a handful of smaller engines that have come up over the past 10 years. One that I don't think has been given a lot of like name in the mainstream space would be something like Adventure Game Studio, that is used for a lot of the kind of like LucasArts, like 2D style adventure games. We're going to talk about RPG Maker later on in this. And I know there's quite a few out there. And like you said, like the first engine you use is going to be an important aspect because it's going to be where you're going to be spending the bulk of your learning. So I guess as a, because I'm sure like for any students watching this right now, they're going to probably ask this question. What would you recommend as a good starting point for an engine to learn?
Well, it really depends. And I would go like first we'd recommend like we'd start with the major ones. Like really, if I was going to recommend a game engine after doing my research on trying some of the other ones, I really wouldn't recommend Unreal to like a first timer. If you haven't coded before, if you don't really understand like game logic or anything like that, Unreal is quite a beast to tame, right? So then we go down like a little bit of a tier and a learning curve. So we go down to like Unity, right? And Unity is based in C Sharp, and it's quite a versatile engine. And actually, that was the one that I spent a majority of my time learning, like around the newer era of game engines. And that was the one that I really stepped foot in, and I learned quite a bit about it. But of course, it's lacking in things that like Unreal has. For example, like a gameplay framework. So Unreal is actually used for production of games like Fortnite, for example. And so Epic actually uses it for production. So it is a production ready engine. Unity, not so much. It has been used, but themselves internally, they do not produce games with it, right? So it's not like road tested as well. Unity does have some issues when it comes to like the gameplay framework. Like there's things missing, like native ways to save, native things like player characters, and like animation framework is kind of lacking in some things. And then like we would go down to like another tier, and we'd probably be going down to like Godot, and then actually GameMaker. I'd probably put that right up under Unity as I was studying, because as I don't know if you were aware, but like let me see which games were made in. I think we had in GameMaker. I got the list right here.
I know a few of them off the top of my head. Hyperlight Drifter.
Yeah. There you go.
Forger, and those are like the two that I usually mention.
Yeah, there you go. So Hyperlight Drifter, you can make a game at least of that caliber. Yeah, Undertale, Hotline Miami, Downwell, Nuclear Throne, Loop Hero, Nidhogg. So like, so that's like the breadth of like what you can do with that game engine, right? And let's see here. Yeah, so if I was gonna recommend one, I would definitely say like going with like either Unity or maybe GameMaker, right? And there's other ones like if you're trying to learn like just basic like gaming logic, there's some other ones that are just like Sketch and let's see here. Honestly, I would really just have to say like Unity or GameMaker would be excellent starting points, and those would be good places to like learn about creating the gameplay framework, what's needed, and all of those things like that. So those are ones that I'd recommend.
Yep. So I guess to kind of build off of that, here's another comment. I think this is one of when we first started to see like indie developers, indie games kind of bubble up in the 2010s, it was more prevalent then. And that was kind of like the prestige of using certain engines. Draken mentioned before we started that one of the most common things people were saying was just use Unity. Like,
just use Unity.
Unity, it does everything, it's the perfect engine. And then we saw that kind of, I guess, rubber band or rubber ball effect when everyone just saying, oh, Unity is just for shovelware, look at all these horrible games. And I wanted to ask you about, and I think Chris mentioned this as well, about like does like I guess like the engine itself carry like a prestige or weight? Like it feels like in today's market it's more important, like and I say this in some of my talks, that you get what you put into it, you get out what you put into it. Like, the engine itself is not going to kind of, I guess, make the game for you, or, be the reason for your success, I guess. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I would say maybe 5 years ago or maybe 6 years ago, definitely, right? Like it would probably impact what you're capable of, or how far, or impact like the type of game that you can get. But now where it stands, right? Like you could almost pull the same game out of Unity, the same game out of Unreal. And then if you were going like parity between Unity and GameMaker, and Unity, GameMaker, and Godot, right? Like there's no really limitation now, because most of them are open source, right? So, and if they're not open source, there's the marketplace for them is so massive, and there's so many plugins or extensions, and they're so modular now that you can really extend them to your how you want them to, what you want them to do, and turn them into basically the engine that you want. It's really up to you and the work that you put into it. So I think also a side tangent, and as I think people used to groan, right, when they would see a Unity symbol or, at first. And I think that's kind of faded now, especially again with like the state of AAA games, is I think that more likely people are just ready to see an indie game instead. And really the engine does not matter as much, I believe, to people. I'm wondering what chat thinks about that, but I think that's where we stand right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I agree with you on that front. And again, we can really turn to the indie market over the past 7 years as proof positive of this. When we see games like everything Chris mentioned in chat, like Pizza Tower is a fantastic game, definitely going to be one of my favorites of this year. It didn't need Unreal Engine.
No.
And as you said, like, it really comes down to what you're able to do. And Chris's analogy about the kitchen, I think, is really spot on. I use a car as my thumbnail. I probably should have swapped that to the kitchen. And it is, again, like, and as you said, let me see what Chris is saying. Yeah, like, to Chris's comment, like, it felt like in those early days that if you didn't use the right engine, you would be considered like, almost kind of like the old, like, you're driving that as your car, or stuff along those lines.
Yeah, you're wearing those shoes?
You're sweating this much?
You're sweating that t-shirt?
And it really, and I think part of this, and I'm not, this one point may be a little too big, when we talk about kind of the, how, like, the bar is being raised on video games. That will probably be a later conversation. I wanted to bring up, like, the kind of, I guess, understanding of what goes into a game. I think is still that kind of issue, where we can see a game that's using Unreal Engine, and it runs, like, flawlessly at 60 frames per second, there's no hitching, no slowdown, and then you can have someone make a game in Unity, or even just a basic Game Maker game, and it's set to, like, 600 FPS or unlimited FPS cap, and it's stuttering, and it's all that. And it's very easy for people, again, to think, oh, well, it's just the engine, all these games look horrible, they're on Unity, ergo, Unity is horrible. Or, again, Game Maker wasn't that good. But, again, as we've said, a lot of this comes down to the understanding of the engine, what you can get out of it. And let's see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at this point, I would say that most engines are on parity, like, with what you can do, right? And it's really when you run into a game that is not running properly, unoptimized, it's just really someone's a lack of understanding of how to use the engine properly, because every engine has its own little quirks and nooks and crannies and things that you need to understand. The animation and system in a Game Maker, for example, is completely different from Unity, and then Unreal is a completely different beast, and then Godot is completely different, right? And so, like, being able to, like, it's like, which one do you learn, and, like, how much do you learn it, and then how much do you optimize it, right? And then what can you get out of it, is basically what it is. But really, like, the engines do not limit you at all. The only thing, and I think we're going to discuss later, would just be, like, the learning curve and where you stand in your game development career, and that might dictate what your output is.
And to Mike's comment about the Unity splash screen, I've seen a lot of people who now get very suspicious about the Unreal Engine's star, especially with a lot of people who make Unreal like their first game, and it doesn't look like enough is being done with it. Because I have played a lot of, like, first-time games out of Unreal, and it all has, like, that very same look to it. And I can always tell when there's something wrong when immediately my computer fan just goes into hyperdrive. So I can tell that they didn't set it to 60 frames or it's just been default to uncapped. And,
right. So this very interesting thing about Unreal. Unreal, it has visual scripting in it, right? So, like, you can actually, like, jump in and you can start visual scripting and start, like, prototyping very quick. But, like, underneath Unreal is it's C++ is what it is based on. And what Unreal allows you to do is it allows you to do some like really like bad programming practices, and it like the game will still run, right? It'll still run, it'll build, it'll work, but there's like a bunch of optimizations that you can build the game out without having to do them and not knowing. And so definitely, if you don't have very much experience in game development, I wouldn't recommend Unreal as your first starting engine. Like, I kind of like.
You cut out there again.
If we're talking about like Unity and Unreal, I liken if you're digging a swimming pool, Unity would kind of be like maybe a shovel or like, I don't know, and then Unreal would be like a giant bulldozer, right? And so like Unity, you can get the shovel and anybody can get the shovel and they can dig and they can have a nice. But with Unreal, you probably need a license to drive the bulldozer, and you need to know how to operate it, flip it over, and yeah, it looks really cool and nice to drive it around, but you might not get the right thing, like the right effect. So yeah, definitely Unreal. I am starting to notice that, and it's because the ease of prototyping, and that's like one of the things that Unreal has been kind of built on quite a while now, is it really allows for easy prototyping. And so while you're prototyping, you might not be learning about the proper way to design game logic, gameplay framework, and stuff like that. So that's where you can see some issues crop up with Unreal and a lot of the sameness, you know. So
I like Chris's comment, the little sandcastle shovels. What kind of shovel is RPG Maker, by the way?
I guess it would be like my son's little toy castle.
We were going like all over in analogies today, weren't we?
Sandcastles, cars, kitchens, ice cubes.
Yeah. And I guess like I'm not sure this is like the right time to bring up stuff like RPG Maker specifically, but anything else like regarding picking an engine before I like kind of bring in the RPG Maker to the conversation?
Okay, so I guess if the question was like what engine do I pick, right? For my first game, I would just say, you know, you could easily start with Game Maker. You could easily, easily start with Godot, and you could easily start with Unity, and I would probably start around in those engines in those areas, like one or two games, your first small games, your first practice games, and then if you feel like the main reason to move to Unreal is if you were making like a fully polished 3D game, because that's like main strong point is 3D. Unity is capable of making a 3D game, but not level of mass or something like that. Like Unity is lacking, and like it's like HDRP, like, and like it's high definition graphics and stuff like that. It's not quite on parallel with Unreal. Unreal just has a massive, like, I mean, all of Unreal Engine 4 was basically like, or even 3 was basically built like on a graphic powerhouse with C++ underneath. Unity is C#, and then Game Maker is like its own little, what script does it use? I think it's its own little proprietary, and then it also has like some visual scripting. So, you know, if you're choosing a game engine, definitely start with, you know, maybe first before you go to the bulldozer, and that's basically it.
All right. And I guess to kind of like take this with like RPG Maker and stuff like that, this is something that we were having this conversation, I think I want to say maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago, about kind of about the idea of using Game Maker as a professional engine, or as a way of getting in the game industry. And this is something that, actually, this is a good question to kind of bring into all the game engines. When we look at kind of the state of game dev discourse 13 years ago, people were talking about specifically how to jump from sitting in your room to working at Nintendo. Like, it was just basically like, much like the Hollywood equivalent of, well, how do I get picked up by Marvel or Disney or anything like that? And a lot of this, I think, early kind of pew-pewing of certain game engines kind of stemmed from that. That, EA is not going to care about you making something in Adventure Game Studio. Activision, well, maybe Activision or id may care about you doing something with a GZ Doom. But for a lot of these kinds of very specific engines / editors, again, Adventure Game Studio, RPG Maker, maybe we can even lump GZ Doom, that's not easy to say really fast, into this conversation. They're not explicitly made to be like a professional game engine. They are meant to be something around a very specific goal and role. So I have some thoughts on like its kind of utility in the market today, but I want to get your thoughts on this first. Like, what do you think about someone saying, you know what, I just want to use RPG Maker, or I just want to make something in GZ Doom or AGS?
Yeah, definitely no problem with that at all. I mean, like the only reason to like not start in it, if you do desire to like start with RPG Maker or any of those like engines of that tier, is that most of the skills are not transferable because a lot of them use like Game Maker's the GML engine, and some of the other ones are proprietary. Like in RPG Maker, all of it's very proprietary, and none of that really transfers over. Now, you might learn some things about like more. You probably learn more about game design than you learn more about than game development because so many of the skills will not transfer over. Of course, there is no problem at all if that is where you want to stay, or if that's the game you want to make. If you want to make like a typical like Final Fantasy like RPG, then start with RPG Maker because it is basically set up. Like if you open up RPG Maker, like the template that you have like a 4-party system like set up, and like all the interactions are there. And so basically all you're doing is just like creating content. So that takes a lot of the work out for you. So you're like basically making content. Like even like with the GZ Doom, like you are just making like maps, maybe in like stuff like that. So like you're really just into creation. Skips a big hurdle when it comes to making games, because a lot of the time you're basically like starting from a blank screen, right? Like there you open up Unreal, there is nothing there. You literally have to start to create something. Now, of course, there's templates and there's things like that exist in all of the engines and examples. You can download stuff from GitHub as stuff like that. But if you are just aiming for those type of tier games, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. The reason I would discourage you from that is planning to move if you're planning to move forward and transfer those skills forward, or if you want to learn a broader discipline of game development, right? If you know the full like entire, you really need to go into a higher tier engine.
Hope you're cutting out again.
Jesus, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I really feel bad, like even calling them tiers, because, like I said, they're almost parity. But again, like there's literally nothing with starting out with RPG Maker, starting out with GCU, nothing wrong with that at all. It's just that most of the skills won't transfer over when you're going to another engine, or say if you wanted to work in a studio like that, they're going to be like, well, we're working in Unreal, or what have you worked in Maker? There's not a lot of skills that transfer over. That would be the only downside. Other than that, that is the game that you make. It's perfect for you because basically you're almost in content creation land, and that's it.
Yep, and as you said, like if you're going to a major studio, like they are working in Unreal. That's what they're working. Like they're not going to let you make the game in Godot or Unity. But as we've said, one of the things that we've seen is that being able to get, and I think this is like one of the major points, at least for me, for today's video or today's podcast, is that getting a game done is a massive accomplishment regardless of the engine you're using.
Yeah, miracle.
And being able to do something like put out a game like Lisa, the Painful that I tried, or what was it? Fear and Hunger 2 in RPG Maker, that is a huge deal. And again, if you are focusing on that specific style or that specific design, if the engine works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't work, and I think Chris may have made this comment earlier, then there's no flaw, there's no problem with swapping game engines if one is just not working for you, or if it's frustrating you, or anything like that.
Right, exactly. Like, when I officially released my first two mobile games, I released those on Unity, right? And then once I found some limitations in the engine, right, that were required, like, I could overcome them, but the amount of work that it would require, and then it probably wouldn't even be on parity with the type of 3D game that I was trying to create. I had to switch over to the engine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot, like so much that I learned from Unity carries over, because a lot, when you're in like, when not everything is proprietary, right? Like Unity is C# and Unreal is C++. You know, they are completely different. They're different languages, but like logic and like the way that gameplay frameworks work and stuff, that is rather similar, and it's similar across the board, right? Like the whole idea of the way that games engines work and the way that they function is actually quite similar between most game engines. Like literally, like if you would take a user Unity, they'd be like, "Is that Unity dark mode?" They might not know the difference. So yeah, there's no problem between.
Mm-hmm.
There's limitation. Of course, that's great. You know.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Yeah, and again, it'll be uphill battle. You're making FPS in Game Maker.
Yeah,
just as if you're trying to make an FPS in RPG Maker as well.
Yeah, that'd be a tough battle for sure. Yeah. And that's what, right. Like if it, and then again, it's really like where your level's at and what type of game are you trying to create, and then there's where you set your sights on the type of engine that you're gonna, right? Like if you're going for a 2D game, Game Maker's an excellent choice. Unity's an excellent choice. There's lots of, when I was looking on GitHub, a trillion just like homemade game engines. I think we have someone in the Discord who's working on their own like game. So like they're everywhere, and so.
Mm-hmm. And Mike brought up, of course, having custom game engines, and that is certainly an option. And I think that may be kind of out of scope for our talk today, but I guess very quickly, any thoughts on making your own custom game engine as a game dev?
Okay, so every now and then when you venture into Reddit, you'll see some people jump in and say, make your own game engine, you know, and yeah, you can. And really, okay, the only reason that I see that you would want to make your own game engine is for your own education and just because you want to do it. In reality, like you would be throwing away such a massive amount of time trying to get onto parity of where these other engines are already at, right? These other engines have massive, and it's just you, one person, trying to make a game engine when like someone like Unreal has like I don't know how many RPG Maker has. Is it the fan, Josh? Is your fan knocking me out?
Yeah, like all of a sudden you just like cut out there again.
Wow, I don't know. I turned off my my mic thing that adjusts, give me like effects and stuff. I turned that off, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So back to creating the engine. I'm kind of not gonna recommend that, right? Like, depending on what you want to do. If like you just want to make a engine, then hey, hats off to you. Go for it, no problem. But there's no reason to go Dark Souls on it in development, right? Plus here. And I'm making my game engine first, and I'm going to spend 2 years learning how to. Then we're gonna, and then we're gonna work on the sound, and then we got to work on the end. Like in a game engine, you have sound, right? You have your the audio framework, you have the animation framework, you have the networking framework, you have the code. Like there's so many things involved in an engine that really undertaking and creating your own, less just really want to say I made my own engine. I don't think that it is like a very good path to take, because there's so many options. There's so many good options where you can just jump straight into content creation, right? So is it like, do you want to make a game or do you want to make a? Because I'm not a betting man, but I would probably bet that if you're making your own game, you're just going to make the game engine, and then you're probably going to make like a little small game, like a type game, to prove its functionality. But to reach the fidelity of, say, an Unreal or Unity, it would take like eons of development, right? For a single. So it's not something that I'd recommend, and unless you're doing something like low level, like a browser based game. But even then, there's stuff like Phaser. There's things that already exist that are there for you. And so why would you be shooting yourself in the knee with just start content creation, right? Mm-hmm. Dark Souls style on it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, Chris Owens, do you have noise suppression on? Could that be?
Let me see. Let me turn my noise suppressant off. I thought I turned it off. Yeah, let me turn it off.
Okay. And,
okay, so it's off now.
All right, we'll see if how that goes. But yeah, and to Mike's comment again, like, education of game dev programming isn't a competition. Like we said, just getting the game done is more than, praiseworthy enough.
Right.
And like you said, like, part of that challenge, if you spend 5 years of your life on a game, and let's say you spend the first 3 of it building your own game engine, what are you able to do with that? Because,
exactly.
As we've said many times over, the consumer doesn't care. They don't care if you locally source your platforms out of France.
Organically sourced game engine, right?
Yeah. They just care about whether your game works or if the art and the aesthetics are on point.
Yeah.
And it is, like, again, when we talk about kind of how the bar has been raised in terms of game design, a later topic, this will come back up for sure then. Yeah. But it is that situation for a lot of developers that when you're trying to build the actual designer game, at the same time you're actually trying to understand how to actually program and code it, it can oftentimes lead to these kinds of issues. And it's why we oftentimes hear that strategy of, again, fail small and fail fast. Yep. That if you're just starting out, don't spend 10 years of your life trying to build that dream game in the engine that you've just downloaded the night before. Make a few smaller games. Experiment with them so you can learn that. And then, like we've said, once you have experience, the stuff that could have taken you months or even years to do, you'll do that in a fraction of a time, and then that time you saved can be put into the actual game dev side of it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, do you want to be creating a game or a game engine? Exactly.
Mm-hmm. It's programs are making custom engines, and it is a very tough line to walk, I think, if you're just starting out, because like we've said, that kind of blank screen phenomena is certainly real. When you're just sitting there with, your Word document open, whatever game engine of choice is open right here, you can literally do whatever you want. So what do you do? What do you do with all this stuff?
Exactly.
Yep, and as Chris said, you're not sure how big your small project is. Because, as we all know, game dev is perfectly precise. You can, I'm sure every developer watching this, exactly down to the millisecond how long it will take you to build your game.
Exactly. I knew this morning when I was working on some C++ components, I knew exactly, I told the wife it'll take me exactly 10 minutes and seconds. I'll be done. And I was done. So that was it. So yeah, we know.
It works perfectly that first time.
Yeah, I had no issues. It compiled. No problems at all. When in reality, no, 2 days of compile issues and just massive amount of problems, and that's really the way it is, right? Like something, and you're implementing this in a game engine already, right? Like you're implementing something in a game engine, and that can take you. You have no idea how long it can take, and just imagine piling that on some game engines. So is it like?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you
Which one is
really cut out there.
Wow, I'm gonna have to get a new mic, Josh.
Yep. And again, when you're just starting out, you don't really want to be dealing with learning to build your own engine. At the same time, you're just trying to learn what game dev is.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some people out there, again, like, there are exceptions to every rule. I know there are a few programs out there who, they took to this stuff, like that. I can't snap my fingers. But they can build this stuff incredibly easy. Like, the programming side is second nature to them. But not everyone is going to do that. Again, the days in which, you can say every designer is also a master programmer, master artist, music composer, the whole deal, it's not going to really happen that much. And yet, to Mike's comment, like fixing problems, being able to fix these issues teaches you how not to do them. Learning through failure is very important. But you also need to be realistic and say, I want to spend 7 years trying to do all this at one time. And it's why you need to have at least that basic understanding. As you said, like, Unreal is certainly like the 10,000-pound gorilla when it comes to the public game engines. If you're not, thinking about making a fully 3D style game using, 4K HD graphics, maybe start with something simpler. And conversely, let's say you do start with something similar, and you realize, what? This engine is holding me back. I just, I'm fighting it to make this kind of game. Maybe you can then look at something being a little bit more powerful.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, and that's where I found myself, and that's what I did. Switched from Unity to Unreal to create to work on my 3D games. And like right now, I wouldn't say I'm in I'm a big advocate for quick development cycles. Like I'm trying to crack that nut, the secret of quick development. I'm ended up not quite in development hell, development river of sticks right now, and that's just because you never really know how small your project really is, right? And that's the thing, right? So.
What does a game dev purgatory look like?
I'm not sure. When I get there, I'll let you know.
Here's a question, chat. What is the game dev equivalent of Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill and then letting it fall back down? Like, let us know in chat about that. Let's get some existential crises.
That's probably making your own game engine, and then that's probably what it's like. Yeah, and I think Mike was up there saying about that why am I anti-programming or like that? I'm not about programming your own game engine. You're more than welcome to program your own game engine. There's no problem. What I'm more advocating is like make a game and work on your game and reduce your development cycle, right? And like you're really increasing your development cycle and you're doubling your development cycle by like wanting to create your own engine. And then making your own game over it. Again, like I think it would just be like purely like if you want to be a hardcore coder and like you'd like to go into like a studio or transfer that knowledge over, then definitely it's a good place to start. But again, if you're just trying to get a game out the door, it's really there's so many engines out there available. There's no reason to invent the right.
Yeah.
So.
And again, the consumer does not care.
They don't care. And no one cares how hard you work at all.
Yeah, like if you think that having a marketing point on your store page says, this was all made by my own custom game engine, it's not really going to fly.
Honestly, let me ask you, like, if you saw a game and it was like, okay, custom game engine, would you be like more likely, or would you be put off by you're like, oh, I think it might be more buggy and I'd be least likely to try? What do you think, Josh?
I think general consumer may be more weary of that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think for me, again, at this point, I just care about what I see, like in terms
Right,
of what's on the
exactly.
store page. But it can be tough to break through those stigmas. I know Time Break Chronicles, this game that, like, from the outside, it looks like an RPG Maker style game, but it was made, I think, by its own, like, custom engine. It looks very similar in terms of structure, but it does a lot of interesting things. But people were, I think, put off a lot by the look of it, thinking, oh, this is just some, you know, half scraped together RPG Maker style game. And again, I don't want to keep, like, beating a dead horse about people not liking RPG Maker. But this is one of the things you have to keep in mind as a developer, that you still, like, to go back to our original point about how the engine itself is not going to be your, you know, silver bullet to success, or your, it's going to magically make your game better. You have to be able to show people that you can do more in this engine. It's why we talk about the importance of making sure your assets match, making sure the
Yes,
aesthetics are on point. One of the
yes,
things that you've mentioned, again, having a functional options menu, not just
yes,
using the default Unity template
yes,
options in your game. Because
yes.
these are the things that people take note of. And you want someone to care about your game, they need to see that you care about it. And just using everything as untouched as possible, you know, just literally go to the Unity store, hit Control C, Control V, and that's it for your game. People are going to, like, look at this and go, you know, did this, like, fall the back of a truck somewhere?
Yeah, and I think that like consumers are quite savvy now. Like I think
Mm-hmm.
they know what the default Unity menu looks like, right? And I think they know what the default like stuff looks like. It's been long enough. We're not like, oh, I've never seen that menu before. We know exactly what it looks like, and so yeah, definitely. Like when you're going to do that, what really matters is like the amount, like what you put into it, and how much you change it and personalize it and make it your own, right? So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And with these smaller game engines, again, like AGS, like RPG Maker, again, and I think to Chris's comment about, like, the easy bake oven, that if you are really damn good at using it,
Yes.
you
Yes.
can do probably far more than maybe even someone could who has no knowledge could do in a
Yeah.
Unity or in a Game Maker. Again, like
Yeah.
something like Lisa using, like, 2D platforming to getting go into RPG Common that was built originally off of RPG Maker is very impressive. And again, if you are just interested in telling a story, or if you just really want to make an FPS like Doom, that's what these engines are literally built for. And again, while there will be people, I'm sure, who will care, oh, this is made in RPG Mirror, this just looks like all these other adventure games. If you can prove that you are doing something legitimately different in that space, that's how you get eyes on it, and more importantly, that's how you start building a reputation for yourself. You
Mhm.
mentioned Undertale with Toby Fox. Like, Toby Fox didn't just immediately go from, I'm going to make Undertale, to, this is Undertale. It took him years of work, years in that space, building up his name and reputation before he did that I think it was a Kickstarter for
Mhm.
Undertale, and it blew up. But again, it takes time for that to work. You can't just show up one day and say, I'm going to download Unity. 48 hours later, here's my finished game. I'm going to sell it for $29.99.
Yeah. Definitely.
I'm trying to think if there is anything else, anything on your list about choosing an
Uh,
engine, working with an engine, anything like that.
let's see. Yeah, because I know you have it hard out, right, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me see here. I'm gonna look over my notes here. I think we've almost covered everything pretty quick here.
I guess
Um,
while you were looking at that, I guess a question I wanted to ask, just to clarify for myself. So, is right now all the major game engines, do you have, other than of course RPG Maker being a price, do you have to spend money to actually do something in it, or is it all based off, like, royalties if you intend to sell? Oop, kind of froze there for a second.
yeah, I think I'm locking out. Am I? Okay, yeah. So so my notes just crashed.
Uh-oh.
Okay, but yeah, so some of them do. Okay, so like, let me reopen my notes. So like Game Maker, you do have to pay like I think it's like for a solo seat, it's like $8, right, or something a year. Unity, I think it's probably. I don't quote me on this. My notes just crashed. Let me see if I can get them open because I have the prices here. Second.
Let's see. While you're doing that, yeah, to Chris's comment, like, it's not going to sell your game in terms of having personal stories or backgrounds, but once people know about you, this is where it can help you out in terms of getting a greater reputation. But again, if you have no, footprint in the indie or game dev space, people do not care if you spent 20 days or 20 years on a game project.
Correct. So I'll just start with Unreal. So like Unreal is free, and they charge a 5% royalty once you make over $1 million, right? So if you're making over $1 million, for the 5% royalty, right? For Godot, it is free and open source, right? Game Maker is $4.99 a year. For desktop export, if you want to be able to export to mobile, it's $10 a year, and if you want consoles, it's $80 a year for Game Maker. So that's like the biggie if you're going to consoles with Game Maker. CryEngine, if for some reason you want to work on that, it's 5% royalty over $5,000. And then RPG Maker is a one-time purchase. They have various different ones. Like some of them vary from, I don't know, $29 to $49, etc. And then Unity, already I did. Yeah, so that's basically the ones. And Godot. So yeah, exactly. There's really not much holding you back from that, right? I mean, like if you're serious about getting into game dev and you want to do it, then it would be like, max you're looking at Game Maker like dollars if you're releasing on console, or free if you're making under $1 million, right? So really no problem.
Yeah. Apparently I own one of the RPG makers. I don't even know when I picked it up. So maybe it's time for me to make like a Josh RPG or a JRPG. Yes. No one's used that tag yet, right?
Yeah, they have not. I'll
be the first.
Be the first one. Yeah. Right. Let's see here. What did it? Yes, I think they did lower Game Maker. I was quite surprised. So when I downloaded Game Maker, you were talking about the Gordon Ramsay Easy Bake Oven. I felt like when I opened up Game Maker, Ramsay, I was like, oh my gosh, the game I could make in here. But it's like I would have to be going to like a TV or something like that, which I'm not making. But yeah, definitely, like when you like master other engines, higher tier engines. And again, I hate to use the word tier. You can easily go back down and like just use the engines to your like disposal, like amazingly so.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions anybody has?
Any other points before we kind of go into our final ones for tonight?
Let's see here. I think that's it on my end. Yeah, if you're going to be starting out, when I was doing my research, the one that really stood out to me the most was actually, I was very surprised with Game Maker's. So I really digging Game Maker. I really like the options that it has. And then I think to me that really stood out, like the way that it was laid out, and like you can edit your sprites in the engine. You don't have to export it. The animation stuff was really nice. So if you're making it, I think Game Maker is really good. Godot's a really good option. Unity's a really good option. Go to Unreal. And that's basically it.
Yeah. And again, I think for my final point, like we said, the game engine itself is an important choice, but it's not going to save your game. If you're not able to make something, if you're not able to understand game design, being in Unreal, being in Game Maker or RPG Maker is not going to cut it. And it's again why we say that game design is more and more becoming its own kind of separate but important craft when it comes to actual game dev. And as we've said, you're not going to find like an RP. Like again, like if you can make a fantastic game in RPG Maker, do it. If you're able to make that dream super over the top and phenomenal game in Unreal, go. But again, if you don't have a fantastic game, if you are not understanding how this works or anything like that, these engines aren't going to do it for you. Again, there is no, we've said this before, like Unity hasn't added in its make great game button yet. That's still like at least another 4 or 5 years out.
Yeah. We were just joshing about that. They don't exist yet.
Just set everything to max Josh, Chris, and
Max Josh.
There you go. There's your game dev tip. If you want to be successful, just set everything to maximum Josh. But I think that is going to do it for this week. Again, if you do have any questions or if you think of anything between when this cast goes up, let us know in the comments down below. Again, for people watching this live on Saturday, the Game Wisdom Game Jam is starting Monday the 14th at noon. So be sure to sign up, get those games, get all those volume sliders. It's going to be running for exactly 1 week. And, of course, do the YouTubing stuff, buy all my books. The deck building book just came out, so be sure to check that one out. And I'm on Blue Sky now, same thing, GW Bicer. And I think that does it for my little speech.
Yeah, and same thing for me. All my links are down below. Wishlist, Rooster Rampage, Samurai Pig. I'm on Blue Sky now. The other one, and all the media is down below. So yeah, so join the Discord, join the Game Jam. If anybody is been in a Game Jam, please join this one. I think this will be an excellent for you to join. I will be in the Discord. Josh will be there assisting you. So please join the Discord and join the Game Jam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really excited for the Game Jam. I am pumped. I'm pumped.
All right. So with that said, we're going to wrap things up for this week. You'll find links to all of Josh's stuff down below as well. And we will be back next Saturday around probably 5:30 as our starting time. So by our next show, I expect to see lots of submissions, lots of volume sliders, and more. And with that said, everyone, come back for discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Hopefully by next week, my AC will be, I'll have an AC, and hopefully Josh's AC will still be working.
Yeah, hopefully my mic will be working too, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, everyone. Have a great night, great weekend, and stay cool.